Singapore's grid is feeling the strain with more solar, more curtailment, and a major push to import 6 gigawatts of low-carbon power by 2035. But can it stay reliable? Joining us to discuss this are Victor Nyan from CSER and Associate Professor Sanjib Kumar Panda from NUS. Glad you could both join us, Victor and Professor Sanjib. So let's start with where this is coming from. Why is Singapore seeing more solar curtailment?
Well, Singapore's power grid, as with many other power grids in the world, is designed for dispatchable load, meaning relatively stable, predictable thermal power generation, and not sudden midday. And because we are ramping up capacity of domestic solar, so even though we have a relatively modern grid, the sudden peak or sudden spikes of solar production at a concentrated location of the grid will still cause a lot of stress to the grid. And because we need to ensure that the grid needs to be stably, reliably operated, there has to be curtailment. When we have excess amount of solar production, we will have curtailment. And that is what we are already seeing today.
Solar curtailment in Singapore is not that obvious. Now, why there is solar curtailment in any part of the world is when there is an overcapacity and the system is not able to take more solar energy because they cannot store it, then there is a curtailment. But I'm giving an example. Within the NUS, we have rooftop solar, and our load demand is much higher than what we produce. So we dump all the solar power into the NUS load so that it is used. But yes, there may be a scenario where it cannot be used. Then you have to curtail it in order to protect all the infrastructure and the equipment connected to it.
But what would you say is the biggest risk to importing 6 gigawatts reliably by 2035?
Well, before we talk about the risk, I think we should understand why Singapore is venturing into importing electricity. Singapore is a heavily import-dependent economy. We're importing 100% of fossil fuel to power our economy. And from energy security considerations, importing electricity is considered a way of diversifying. But then again, this comes really with significant challenge. And so first of all, in fossil fuel import, we know how to stockpile. We have a strategy to have enough buffers to, power our economy in the event of disruptions of supply or sudden price shock. We are able to have the buffers to mitigate or hedge against those risks. Whereas in the case of power import, this is electricity that we're talking about. When something happens, it will happen instantaneously. So for example, if there is an outage from the supplies, the outage will instantaneously reflect it in Singapore. And so generators backup generations or backup options needs to kick in almost instantaneously to match up to the supply gap. And this is to avoid a blackout. If you are looking at 6 gigawatts, this could be easily half, maybe more than half of our peak demand. And if there is a sudden disruption at that kind of large scale, it will be very difficult for Singapore to react in a timely manner to avoid a blackout. And because this is power grid, everything happens. And if that disruption happens over the next few days, weeks, then that will be an extended blackout. So for the industries, for example, refineries, petrochemicals, manufacturing, and now with our plan to develop data center market, these could cause significant disruptions to the continuous operation of those industries. And that could also jeopardize the economic activities in Singapore.
Now, the problem with the renewable energy sources, as for example, the solar, intermittency in nature. So solar is there only for about 12 hours of the 24 hours. So then when you dispatch a certain amount of electrical power to the user, they want a continuous supply of power without any disruption. So the major problem is because of intermittency in nature, you need to back up with energy storage devices. And battery energy storage systems, although the prices are dropping, still at this point of time, it is expensive to be implemented at the grid scale.
So if you were to make recommendations, how can Singapore better coordinate rooftop solar, EV charging, and batteries to support grid stability?
I think technology does offer a way to address more efficient, smooth, and reliable integration of solar energy. Right. We talk about smart grid, microgrids, and also thinking about having battery energy storage to buffer the sudden increase in solar energy production. But I think the more important part is how do we orchestrate all of these technologies? The idea of virtual power plant or VPP that we have been discussing, to say that, well, if you connect EVs right into the grid, this EV also be transformed into distributed energy storage, meaning they can go back and forth with the grid. For example, the vehicle to grid technology not only allows the vehicle to charge from the grid, but also allows the vehicle to discharge to the grid as and when the grid needed. But of course, this sophisticated coordination between the grid and also the vehicle. But then again, from a technical standpoint, this can be implemented. I mean, technologies are already available, but I think more importantly, we should also recognize that you need to have the appropriate policy and regulation in place. And at the same time, we should not forget about public acceptance.
Yes, there are two aspects of it. One, we are importing, and when you're importing 6 gigawatt, the Energy Market Authority makes it a point that the supplier from other countries, when they dispatch or transfer power to Singapore, if it is coming from renewable energy sources, they must incorporate energy storage devices so that Singapore gets that 6 gigawatt of power on a continuous basis. Now, within Singapore, we have already the mandate that all the government buildings have rooftop solar panel. We run out of space within Singapore to produce all the power that we need from solar. So we have gone and maximize where we could use the solar power, not only just on the land, in the reservoir, we have floating solar panel, then we have gone to the sea and we have floating living lab to tap solar energy and bring it back to Singapore to stabilize the grid.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Victor and Professor Sanjib.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, those were Victor Nyan, founding co-chairman at the Center for Strategic Energy and Resources, and Associate Professor Sanjib Kumar Panda from National University of Singapore. For more news, visit sbr.com.sg.